Hit it.
Oh, sorry. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Daryl Basanjo. Thank you for attending our panel on activity stream, social aggregation, and the standards surrounding them. I have 5 distinguished panelists here who are all working in various companies in various fields in the space surrounding like activity streams and social aggregation services. Just to kind of get the terminology question out of the way, how many people here are familiar with Twitter, by show of hands? How about Facebook? Okay, great. So an activity stream is just that stream of activity you see on a Twitter or on a Facebook or a site like Facebook. It shows you what your people in your social network are doing. How about friend feed? Are there many people here familiar with friend feed? Okay. So friend feed is, is what we call a social aggregation service because it aggregates all your activities from multiple social networks into one place. So,
hey, Dare, what was the first company to aggregate feeds? Oh, that was Plaxo. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure.
All right, and that's Mark Cantor. So I will start by introducing each member of the panel and asking them a leading question so to kick off the discussion. So I'll start with Luke. So Luke Shepard is a developer of Facebook who's worked there for 2 years. He most recently worked on Facebook Connect, which is a service that allows you to log into third-party sites with your Facebook ID, and then any of the activities you publish on that site also show up in your activity stream on Facebook. He's also Facebook's representative on the board of the OpenID Foundation. So my question for Luke is, it's kind of interesting. So Facebook Connect allows me to log in on third-party sites, but it's based on proprietary technology, and yet you're on the board of the OpenID Foundation. How do you explain this contradiction?
So it's not a contradiction. So we've been working on, at Facebook we like to move really fast, and so when we worked on sort of Facebook Connect, we started on it last year sometime and sort of worked on it for several months. And we were really just interested in getting it out there and sort of seeing how people would use it. And then shortly after, we launched to the public in December. And so, Facebook is, we really wanted to get out there to make sure that people were being open and able to, connect with each other across the web. And now we're sort of going back and figuring out how to fit in open standards. I think open standards and sort of being open with the way that technology that we use is going to be critically important going forward in order to make sure that everyone can use the technology instead of just Facebook users.
Okay. To follow up that question, so is this an indication that Facebook plans to move away from proprietary technologies for some of these technologies going forward?
Facebook has always been a huge supporter of open. We're built on the whole LAMP stack. We don't really like to. We like to sort of get things done very quickly. So if using open source and using open technologies as a way to sort of achieve the goal of helping people connect and share, then we're totally about that and always have been. And I think that we worked really hard to get Connect out. There was, at the time that we started developing it last May and April, the open stack as it exists today didn't even exist. A good chunk of the elements in it they didn't exist yet. And so we had to invent stuff because the existing open standards didn't help. And now that we've sort of led the way here and shown what's possible and how people can be connected, I think now we're going back and working with Monica and Kevin and a lot of those other companies to sort of figure out what are the common elements across different sites and what everybody's doing, and figure out how it can fit in with Connect. So I think we'll be interested in using and developing a lot of these open standards, just because it increases the sort of information flow.
Okay. So this is Monica Keller in the middle.
Hi.
She's the dev manager for MySpace's activities platform and the MySpace homepage. She also works very closely with the MySpace ID team, and to ensure that activities can both be pulled in from third-party sites into MySpace and also pushed out from MySpace. For example, this screen shows an activity stream from MySpace being hosted on a Google page. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Using MySpace ID, I was able to authenticate one time and allow Google to query all of the APIs to get my information. So not only do we have all of the status updates, we have also the activity stream. And that's the most valuable information that MySpace has because it has the latest and greatest that our users are doing.
So you recently announced MySpace ID, and MySpace ID is kind of built on a number of community standards such as OAuth and Open Social and so on. Given the difference in your approach from Facebook's, what was the rationale for going with these community standards versus your own technology?
So basically, we feel that embracing open standards allows the community to quickly engage with us. So they don't have to learn yet another technology. It's already out there, and all of the sites are using it. So we feel that it will provide a lot faster development, and we don't have to have a specific partner deals. We can just put out our documentation, follow the standards, and then several third-party sites will join us.
So is your expectation that multiple sites will be using the same open community standards as you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. So this is John McRae from Plaxo. He's the Vice President of Marketing at Plaxo. He's described himself as a self-appointed evangelist for an open stack for the social web. Since 2007, he and Plaxo have been working diligently championing portability, interoperability, and user control of their data. So Plaxo has a service called Plaxo Pulse, is that correct? So can you describe how this service and your experiences around this service has influenced your belief that there should be an open stack for the social web?
Sure. Well, I think in some ways you have to go back to a period of time before there were social networks. And Plaxo really pioneered a model in which people would join a networked service that would help them stay connected to the people they know and care about. That took the form of an internet-based address book. But we didn't want to build just a destination address book that was a silo aside from all the tools and services you already used. So before this term data portability, we were working hard on letting users get access to their data across the different tools and services they use. We started with synchronization with Microsoft Outlook, eventually sync with the Mac address book. And the funny thing happened as social networks and Web 2.0 came around, the job of keeping someone connected to the people they know and care about across all the tools and services they use, it didn't get easier, it got harder. And in fact, we started to see that to solve this problem, we really needed to think about it differently. And we really loved what we were seeing in the news feed inside Facebook as a model for really getting a fun way to stay engaged with the people you know and care about, kind of this stream of stuff going by. And we thought, actually at South by Southwest 2 years ago, our product team said, what if we came up with a web-wide news feed? It was aggregating stuff on behalf of the user and letting them share exactly what feed they wanted to share with whom. And so we launched Plaxo Pulse in the summer of 2007 and ran smack into the set of problems this panel is here to talk about, which is, sure, there were 30 different sites that had RSS feeds that we could set our crawlers to get, but many of them were relatively obscure sites. Everyone had a different notion of format. It was a very manual, non-scalable process. And we thought that some of the most interesting stuff would not be just that which is out there hanging in the public behind an RSS feed, but some of the really interesting things that people might want to share if we could let them do that privately. So using OAuth to get at their ratings on Netflix, or the trips that they want to share via TripIt, and they don't want to share them with the world, they want to share them selectively with friends and family. So that's the kind of stuff that we're working on.
Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce Kevin Marks. Kevin Marks is the developer advocate at Google for Open Social. Open Social is a family of open specifications for building for APIs for social networking sites. Kevin works with both internal Google developers and external developers to Google, bringing them together to try and move the social web forward in an open manner. So my first question for Kevin is, Google has been very active in co-authoring and evangelizing this notion of an open stack for the social web. And you participate in OAuth, you participate in Open Social, and it's not clear to me, looking at some of the looking at some of the screens, I don't see a Google product that really fits in this space. So is Google's interest because of Orchid, or is it for some unreleased product we don't know about yet? Or is there some other reason that we can't yet fathom as to why Google is interested in this space?
Well, at its heart, Google is built on open standards. If it wasn't for HTTP and HTML, Google's crawlers could not have gone around pretending to be a browser and made sense of the web and indexed it for everyone. So it's baked into the company's DNA. So what we try and do is understand the web and the standards and the directions it's moving and help promote open standards across that. And when necessary, provide open source solutions for places where there may be a market gap or something. If you look at Chrome and Android, those are strong examples of us funding and releasing open source projects so that there can be more stronger standard support in different fields. And Open Social is an example of that, where we sat down, we realized that the social stuff was, 2 years ago, as John says, it was fairly chaotic. Everyone had a different API. Every site had their own way of expressing things, and they were all slightly different models. And so part of that came from our internal projects at Orchid, which is a fairly large social network, if not in the States, and also from our work with Gmail and the other tools that keep track of addresses, as John said. And we realized there was a lot of commonality there. We realized we wouldn't necessarily be able to write all the features we needed ourselves, so we started looking about how we could find ways for third parties to interact with that. And then we sat down with many of the other social networks around the world and said, do you have this problem too? And the answer was overwhelmingly, yes, we do. We got that from MySpace, we got that from High5, we got that from Viadeo, we got that from Netlog. So we ended up sitting down together and saying, let's find what we agree on, let's specify that and iterate on that. And so the first release of Open Social was about 15 months ago now, and that was a sort of very small core. And what we've been doing is adding to that over time. And the first sort of released Open Social products was just over a year ago, which was then on MySpace, Orkut, and High5. Now they're on something like 25 different social networks with 700 million users around the world. But as I said, if I could list them and get you to put your hands up, and you may not have heard of most of them, because what you find is that different people choose different social networks for different purposes. But having common APIs across that means you can write an application that works with all of them. The other thing that's changed over the last year is we've gone from the model was a gadget embedded in a page like the iGoogle page you see there. So you could write a little web page that sits in the page and talks to the container, talks to the environment, and makes sense of the environment, brings the friends in from there, to extending that across the web where we have standards for one site to log into another and bring the users with it and feed the activities back. And that's something that we're starting to see more of now as those standards have been agreed and are maturing. And now we're starting to see ways of enriching the sort of simple feeds we've got going back and forth now with more details about what the activities and things actually are. And that's where we're working with these guys to try and converge that stuff.
And you also have Google Friend Connect too, right?
We also have Google, I didn't even mention it. We also have Google Friend Connect, which is an end-user product for webmasters. The idea of it is you can put a small amount of JavaScript into your site that makes your site into a social site. It lets you log in with OpenID, it lets you connect your friends from other sites into that site, so as soon as you log in, you can see what friends you already have who've logged into that site, and it also lets you feed activities back to other sites such as MySpace and Plaxo, so that if you have a dashboard like they have for your activities, your friends can see you interacting across the web, not just within their site.
So Open Social is working towards standardizing a notion of activity streams, and there's also an activity streams effort that is trying to standardize its namesake. Why are there two divergent technologies in this space?
There are 12 divergent technologies in this space. That's part of the problem. There are many sites that have been doing this kind of thing, as John says, but they all have slightly different APIs, and we haven't fully converged that yet. What we have with Open Social is we have a reasonably good spec for reading and writing activities within the Open Social world, but bridging that out to the rest needs some more convergence. And so we need to better express sending photographs, we can express people within Open Social, expressing people because it's per domain, expressing that outside is going to take some more work and so on. So we've got a space of implementation that are working, but connecting that to the rest of the web is going to take some more iteration.
Okay.
And in fairness to Kevin and Google, as another standard called portable contacts evolved, we saw Google embrace that and include that specification as part of the open social spec. So there's every reason to believe that Google will continue to do that.
Thanks for that addition, Mark. And I introduced Mark Cantor. He's well-known. He's a
man who needs no introduction.
He's a thought leader in the space of social software. He's been writing and thinking and evangelizing social software concepts for years. He's the CEO of Broadband Mechanics. Thank you for being here, Mark. My question for you is, you're the one person here who, including myself, the panelists, who isn't here representing like some big faceless corporation. What is your stake here?
Right. So I've been in the business 25 years. I might be the oldest guy in the room. And I represent you. I represent everybody who isn't a big company. I've been through the gauntlet with Microsoft and Apple. I've been through the gauntlet with the web. I've been through the ups and downs. We're going on like our fourth downturn here, okay? We know the game here. The big co's want us to be their developers. Ballmer gets on stage and screams about developers, right? Really, I'm not even here representing you folks because you seem to have a clue. It's everybody else out in the hallway who doesn't have a clue, right? Who should be here understanding the historic thing that's going on. Because lock-in has been the #1 strategy in our industry. Microsoft has you locked in, whether you know it or not. Apple has those iPhone developers locked in. All right? Now, what we're seeing here today is unprecedented levels of cooperation from all the major players. And we all realize that rather than, shall I say we, them, they realize that rather than to put their own agenda first, that really the agenda should be about the user's experience. And what do users want? And we're at a key point now where not only are we understanding that users want to control their data and move around, but that openness can also benefit the platforms. See, it's a win-win for everybody. All right? And so as we move forward and we talk about this discussion specifically about activity streams, we realize that we'll be able to take a stream out of Facebook, play it in MySpace, take something over here, Google will spider it, Plaxo will offer it up into the Comcast world because Plaxo is owned by Comcast, right? We'll be able to bridge this into our living room, our cars. This is being a pervasive technology that is going to be available everywhere. This is the hottest thing that's going on right now. All right? So I'm just a cheerleader.
So on the topic of lock-in, this reminds me when I was at South by Southwest, someone asked, so what exactly is wrong if eventually all the feeds just belong to Facebook and we live in a world where Facebook Connect is how we log into sites and Facebook is how we find out what's going on with our friends, and if Facebook allows us to pull those feeds into other sites, why should anybody else worry about this?
Natural
so
selection,
that's,
right?
I think everybody wants to answer that question. So
It's going to be like natural selection, survival of the fittest. You always have to have competition to drive better products.
It's also what is going on right now, as Mark says, this is historic. The web is going through its biggest transformation since its birth. And the web is going social. Today, we're in this really awkward phase where the most early adopter folks are using 20 different social applications. But we're doing that because we're willing to put up with a lot of pain and a lot of brokenness. But if we can collectively, and in fact all the companies up here are working to work together to enable interoperability, the number of social sites that regular people will be using a year from now will be similar to the number of websites they use now, because everything is going social. The New York Times is going social. Netflix has gone social. So a view that one company, no matter how great their product could be, would somehow pose a credible alternative to the internet as we know it, I just don't think will fly.
So Luke, what do you think about Facebook being the one ring to rule them all?
I mean, that's kind of a loaded question there. I actually agree with everything that they've been saying, that I wish Facebook could become this all-encompassing, but it's a fact that we're a small company. We've got, 200 engineers. There's no way that we could possibly build something that fits all of the diverse types of streams and activities and things and social things people want to do on the web. I mean, Facebook, they realized this before I joined. They realized this, over 2 years ago, which is why they decided they were the first company to build a social platform, which was, nothing had been done before, because they recognized that at the time they only had 40 engineers and they couldn't possibly build all the different things that people would need across the web. So I think, and Facebook Connect that we're working on now, we're working with all these companies and like big and small to basically let other people can do a much better job than we can of providing social experiences and social activities. And I think that we've seen lately, just in the last 6 months, there's a resurgent, like a rise of this real-time aggregation of streams that's just sort of come out of nowhere. Like Twitter is going explosive. We're growing really fast. MySpace is incorporating activity streams. Like it's just like there's just streams of data, and we're going to I think there's a trend towards more people sharing more information more regularly, constantly getting like real-time updates. There's no way that all of those are going to come from Facebook, and I don't think that anyone at the company thinks that that's true. So I don't know, I think having an open standard and reducing the friction for developers to shoot these little pieces of data around so that, Flickr can tell their friend, someone who is using Flickr can tell their friend on MySpace or tell their friend on Facebook they've uploaded photos, and have that just work. It's kind of the dream of this whole thing that we're working towards. I just don't think it's possible without having multiple, various, diverse services, each focused on their own, group of people.
Okay.
It's also the case that at the core, if we get this right, we don't see it yet today, but this blueprint of various aggregators that bring to you the stuff that the people you know and care are doing from all these different sites, and you're seeing things in the stream, well, there should be a virtuous cycle. Things you discover in the stream should bring you out to the web to use services that you might not have even been aware of before you saw that your friend shared this activity via that site. And we haven't yet cracked the nut on that, because there's still friction. If you go to that site, you have to go through that painful sign-up process again, upload your photo, and how do you hook up the feed? Facebook Connect actually is the first example of a product out there that really has solved most of that.
I'd say it's the second. But
Well, I think Google Friend Connect solves a slight related problem and makes it really easy for a site to get that social stuff going and the stuff flowing as well. But for an end user, like I want to walk up to a site and present third-party credentials and have things work seamlessly. And Facebook Connect is an example of doing that right now.
And yeah, we're trying to solve the same problem, except we're trying to solve a slightly harder problem in that we're giving choices. So you can sign in with a Google ID, a Yahoo ID, AOL, any Open ID. You can connect to multiple services and so on. And at the moment, that's, in order to build that, as you said, last May we had to do a bunch of proprietary calls to the sites to do that, and that helped reveal that there were some standards missing there. I think OAuth is the key one there. If there's one standard to look up coming away from this, OAuth is vital, because that lets you inject authorization into HTTP requests. That means you can basically, rather than take the username and password and impersonate the user and go and scrape a site, you can actually make an HTTP REST call, present the OAuth token, and get back the information that user has given you permission to see, and it understands who you are. And that is a vital part of this. It lets you draw stuff over the web from these sites, but with trust in who's sharing it, rather than just putting fully public data. That was one piece that we needed to add for this to work. We started writing the spec 2 years ago-ish, and now that's actually broadly implemented. It's implemented by Google, it's implemented by Yahoo, not yet by Microsoft, it's implemented by Plaxo, implemented by MySpace. So, that's one we're getting there. The portable contacts is another example. Again, several of us here have implemented that. We've got that at Microsoft, we've got that at Plaxo, MySpace, Google. So lots of these pieces are starting to fit together. But you'll only see the true benefits of it when they start to be all there. At the moment, using OpenID doesn't give you a strong benefit over username and password, because all you get is saving the login. But the difference between an email address and a URL is a URL you can fetch data from. So once you can discover the URL the user has, look for the API endpoints that belong with that, and call some of these standards, you suddenly find that you can bring this stuff across the web much more easily without having to write custom code for each site, which means you will only support the 3 big ones. But if you can actually discover that, then that means any site that you build can become a source for this, as well as a place that draws on it.
Mark, you were going to interject?
Yeah, innovation is what wins the game. And Facebook is on the cutting edge of innovation. The Facebook experience is the best experience. So no wonder everyone's using Facebook, right? But let me point out to you that on this panel, we have a consumer cable television company that's going to marry this entire other world into our world. All right? I don't know how many of you use Comcast, but it is way superior to what AT&T and others support. So it is cutting edge. And if that could be connected to the web, that's incredible. Okay? We have Google building underlying API layers so I can find out where my friends are on my maps, what my friends are searching for, what my friends are reading in Reader. Okay? That's incredible infrastructure. Okay? We have MySpace innovating and creating new models in the music business. The MySpace music service is incredible. If you all don't know about this, please go check it out, okay? So, and we've got Facebook continuing to push the envelope and innovating. Now, who's left on this panel? Oh yeah, Microsoft. And so here you guys are, and Dare decided he's not going to represent. Angus already left the room, but needless to say, you guys are putting up where you shut up. Let me just quickly point out to you that 3 years ago, I asked Bill Gates for APIs into the contacts, and we got them. Okay? 2 years ago, the Live platform was announced. Last year, Live Mesh was announced. This year, the code is shipping. Okay? Now, I don't have to tell you guys what it means for Microsoft to reinvent itself yet again. Right? To listen to the trends and pay attention to the innovations going on and not get left behind. That is part of the Microsoft DNA. All right? So this is an all-inclusive thing here. And yes, we can learn and copy from Facebook, friend feed copied from Facebook, Facebook copied from friend feed, whatever. The innovation continues to move forward. Right? The idea here is that it benefits our users.
So we've been talking for 30 minutes. I just want to let the audience know that there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions. So start queuing up your questions. You can stand in line behind any of the mics just go to the mic. And I also, I have a bunch of other questions, but I'd like to hear what the audience has to ask. So if you have questions, just
hello. And tell us your name.
I'm David Clow. David. Hello.
Hi.
I'm not sure it's actually a question. Maybe it's me not really understanding things. We're talking about benefits for the end users. To me, the very fact that there are 15 services out there that all propose uploading pictures, contacts, and things like that, and the very fact that there is a need for aggregators is a sign that we are not serving the end users. Really, if my family wants to see my pictures, I'd much rather give them one URL, one address that they can all go to and be guaranteed that whatever I post is going to be right there. So you could say that's an aggregator. But I want the same thing for me. If I want to post a picture, I want to go to a single place. If I want to add a contact, I want to go to a single place. So, sure, we're trying, sorry to be a little long, it seems to me that we're trying to solve the problem of having many services that do the same thing via ways to authenticate against all of those services in a standard way. But wouldn't the best solution be that there is just one service?
My friend, can I answer this real quickly? My friend, there isn't one soda pop and there isn't one potato chip.
I was going to say the same thing. Do you just eat one kind of chocolate for the rest of your life?
Do you propose which company should be the provider of all services?
Yeah, I mean,
I have a proposal. So let me take it another way. Yeah, you want one dashboard that you go to, but you want to be able to choose between them. The thing I said about all these different social networks that have signed up, 700 million users worldwide. When I started this project, I didn't know half of them existed. I keep finding 20 million user social networks around the world that I didn't know existed because my friends aren't on them. But other people's friends are on them. 20 million of their friends are on them, and they want to go to that place to look for their stuff. They don't want to go to the place that you happen to use. So if they can take the stuff from the photos that you're publishing at your preferred place and feed them into that, they're happy. If we can lower the friction to doing that, not requiring you all to go to the same place, that's the power of this.
let alone Singapore, Dubai, Moscow, Berlin. I mean, it's a big world. A lot of people have computers, and you can't expect them all to be on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's also the case that it's really irritating when someone sends you an email to share some photos with you, and for you to see them, you have to join Kodak or some other company's service just to see the photos that they want to share with you. The reality is the people you know and care about are already using a variety of different services around the web. You want to see their pictures. If you have to join Picasa and Flickr and Kodak in order to see those pictures, that's broken.
Yeah.
Well, can I add something real quick just to touch on? So John mentioned email, and we don't talk about it too much, but to me, email represents sort of the golden standard for what we want to achieve as far as what a decentralized, distributed identity system is. I mean, there are, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands, millions of email providers out there, and there's a couple of big ones. Microsoft is the biggest, or Yahoo is, you know, there's a couple of really big ones, and there's like thousands and thousands of niche email providers. But I can email anyone in the world at any of those providers and be like guaranteed that it's going to get to that address. And that's sort of the goal of what we want here, is to be able to have a couple of big providers, of course, that will serve the majority of the needs, but there's going to be needs across the universe. In Berlin, and I mean, some of this stuff is impossible for one company to do. You know, Berlin and Russia and Dubai, they have different laws. They've got different cultures, different norms, different ways of operating with data. And we need a way for somebody who lives in Berlin and uploads photos and is friends with my dad, for my dad to be able to just get, like you said, have a dashboard he goes to and just have it all. I mean, I think the potential here is just huge for this social, this social web where they can just sort of be connected to all these different sites.
And the solution that you find in the summer of '09 might be surpassed later on by somebody who's better. And that's called the free marketplace. That's called software developers continue to push the envelope. That's a good thing.
Yeah, so I think you're totally right, just not wanting to constantly make a decision of where to get all your data. And I think, you know, working on the MySpace homepage, we are working towards getting all the latest data. Like, well, we're trying to get Facebook's data on the MySpace homepage, actually, and work with other social networks. So users who don't feel like making a choice every day don't have to be forced to. But it's true, we still can't stop innovation. You know, if Plaxo comes up with a superior interface, then users may go there. So we have to continue to compete in that arena.
So there are a bunch
Storage? So my friends at Microsoft, Google, and everybody wants to offer you storage. Don't forget Amazon.
That's the problem. Everybody wants to sell me storage.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
We'll give you some storage.
Dude, go to the grocery store. There's not just Coca-Cola. There's Pepsi-Cola and Sobe. I mean, come on.
So there are a number of other people in line who've been waiting patiently for their questions to be answered. So we can, like, the panelists will be here afterwards, so you can really dig in with Mark on why Facebook should rule them all. So you've been waiting for a question patiently in the back. Sorry, if you could just tell us your name and ask your question, please.
Joe Regan with Syslogic Incorporated. It's kind of a, not quite falls into aggregation, but what are your thoughts on managing your identity or kind of like persona management across the different platforms? You know, it's pretty clear division, like LinkedIn is your business, Facebook more personal, but sometimes there's a little bit of crossover. And there might be some business contacts you have on Facebook that, you know, you don't want to say you had a really lousy day at work because that might affect certain relationships. What are your thoughts on that and propagating the data and choosing who gets to see what?
I have some thoughts. In fact, I've designed a tool called a persona editor. Now, the reality is that most people today don't see this as a problem they need to solve. They keep their sex life different than their dad life, than their gambler addiction, and their Facebook persona. And don't forget World of Warcraft, okay? So they keep all their personas separate. But I believe that in the future, we'll have one tool that can allow me to edit and manage all these personas. And if you'd like to invest money in my company to help me pay for that, or I'll pitch these guys, because I think this is needed.
Right, okay, so I go the other way. I say at the moment, you do choose different sites for different aspects of your life. You don't want your Suicide Girls profile and your LinkedIn profile having anything to do with one another, specifically because you are using them for different facets of your life. But part of that is because each of these is fairly open and public, and you're worried about leakage, just as you do with different email addresses. I suspect we will still keep doing that. We may want to mix some of these back together again. We may want to join them over. So having a standard you can move stuff from one to the other is helpful. Even if you want to set up a new one, it's nice to be able to start it from something and then trim that stuff out again, and that helps. The other piece of this is you don't actually want hundreds of these. There are lots of sites where using your sort of standard public profile is a useful thing, and it's a time saver. Putting up those little dialog boxes that say enter your name and phone number and zip code and blah, it's like, shit, not again. And you go through having to fill this thing in, or you give up and go away. So saving people that step is a good thing for the users. It's also a good thing for the website developer. That's a whole bunch of annoying form code you've got to write. And also, people don't see why they would fill it in for you. They get annoyed, they start lying to you. Go histogram your zip code databases, and you will say, we've got all these users in Beverly Hills and Schenectady, because 902.10 and 123.45 are what you type in when you're annoyed. So if you can actually draw on a profile from another site and use that for your website, A, you're saving yourself code, and B, you're much more likely to get reliable data from the users, and you're saving the user time and effort. So there's a strong value in drawing that stuff in.
I also think that we're in the early days of this right now, and we've gotten accustomed to some set of models, but I think there's going to be a lot of evolution. Plaxo happens to use connection levels of family, friend, and business, which is better than one bucket for everyone, but is probably not a perfect mapping to the way the world really is. But I think we're starting to see, like, for example, we would love to accept LinkedIn as an authority around whose business connections, or Facebook as an authority around whose friend connections, or Genie as an authority around family connections. So one thing I'm looking forward to over the next 12 to 18 months is, as we do more of this interoperability stuff, beginning to honor those things that have already been figured out on one or more of the sites.
Yeah, I mean, I think... Sorry.
I
was just... we talk a lot earlier about sort of making the world more open and setting data around, and I think you've touched on one of the critical points, which is that having control over that data and who it's sent to is a critical element of making this more open. I mean, so we talk a lot about the one angle, but that so I mean, at Facebook we've tried, and it's certainly not perfect, not there yet, but we've definitely got a lot of tools in place to help people manage those personas, so that you can have like friend lists and have privacy that only a certain person can see this or that. And I think Plaxo has innovated in that area as well, and a lot of so I think basically we're going to see more of, you might have different silos, and that might be the way that one person wants to do what they want to do. Other people might just want to have a one-size-fits-all, but still have the control to choose exactly what their data goes.
I mean, so what I was going to add to that was that the model at the moment that a lot of sites use is go scrape your webmail using some skanky library that goes and pretends to be me and logs in. And that's perforce the model you've been stuck with, because that's where the contact stores were. Because of that, people tend to segregate their email addresses because they don't want to do that. If we have a richer model in any of these sites, and they can compete on building better editing tools for you, using OAuth is the correct answer there, because OAuth lets the site decide who gets to see what, so they can actually enforce that the site you're signing up for only sees the business contacts, or only sees the personal contacts, or only sees the family contacts, and you can be reasonably sure that that's how it will behave. So as that infrastructure starts becoming pervasive, we'll start seeing that model can actually work, and you can use a richer editor in one of these sites, and you can bring more of your stuff in there as you get more comfortable with them as custodians of your data.
Okay. So I'll have you ask a question. Sorry. Thank you for your question.
He was first.
Yes, you're right.
Nick.
One moderator.
He stood up first.
I'm Nick Ketzevelis. My question's around authentication and who I should trust with my authentication credentials. And of all the services up here, if I'm using a small, more obscure OpenID provider, how many of you are going to trust that and let me log in and use all of your services and use that as mine?
We do today.
So if I come in from
Jan
Rain,
from my OpenID,
yeah.
you can create a new account on Plaxo today.
And Frank Connect does the same. Frank Connect will allow any OpenID. Now, that's not to say either of us, we may end up blacklisting some dodgy ones in future, but at the moment it's wide open. You can sign into Frank Connect with any OpenID, and that will get you any of the 4 million or so Frank Connect sites out there.
Beyond Friend Connect, though, at Google?
At Google, it also works in Blogger. It's tougher for some of the other services because they have an email address assumption baked in. It's something we're looking at.
And that's what it's the email address assumption that's the big problem?
Yeah, it's a structural problem.
It's not a trust problem?
So there are some services where there will be a trust problem, but email address is a trust problem too. At some point, assuming that email addresses are trustworthy is this sort of thing that we're so used to doing. We don't see the problem. If you actually look at it, they're no more trustworthy than OpenIDs. I can mint as many email addresses as I want tomorrow. So that isn't an argument against OpenID. That's just a structure that we're used to. What you may end up is, for the places where you need more trust, you need more factors of authentication. And we already do that for some of our services now, where we'll have a second authentication factor, like a credit card for services where there's money involved, like a cell phone callback for services because those are more constrained. You see that in all these sites, and you see that in other systems too.
So I'd like to remind the panelists to keep it brief. We have about 5 people standing in line. So
Sorry.
That's okay. All right.
Hi, my name's Robert. I work for Yahoo, and just had kind of a question and observation about the nodes and edges in the social graph. A lot of this is a social graph. I have LinkedIn, Twitter, Mail, Messenger are 2 or 4 of my big social graphs. I have to have separate identity management, separate graph management, and you end up with a problem between nodes and edges, right? I have multiple nodes on the internet, and I also have multiple edges of trust between people, and they're not always bi-directional. You get a friend request, you might want to accept it, so you're kind of polite, but I might want to put that in my bit bucket. I don't really care about this friend, but sure, they can connect to this one aspect of my life, but they're not going to see all my pictures or all my messages or whatever. So I think that that's just a really difficult problem, and I was hoping to kind of understand y'all's perspective on that.
So for MySpace, what we have done to solve that issue is we actually have friend categories, and everything you do on MySpace, you can basically publish to certain friend categories and not have it accessible to other friend categories. So even your activity stream, you can block the specific friends without them knowing, and for them to not get your activity stream. And we're working hard to get all of this integrated with Open Social and the standards to respect all of the friend categories.
I think it sounds like, I just want to clarify, it sounds like what you're asking is kind of like you have accounts at multiple services. You've got a Yahoo Mail account, and you've got a Twitter account, and you have a Facebook account. And in each of these services, you've got a set of contacts, and they are somewhat potentially disjoint and potentially overlapping lists of people and different things between the two. Yeah, that's like, I think, sort of the holy grail of the whole distributed social web. And that's one of the hardest problems out there, is managing these connections across. When we were rolling out Connect, we've had to sort of think a lot about this. Like, dealing with John, we have talked a lot about what happens when I go to a new site and I have my Facebook friends, and then how do I map that onto new friends? I think in the future, some of these standards, some of the support for them, like OpenID supports this rel me. Like it supports the ability to say this node, this OpenID equals this OpenID, and you should treat them identically. And that's going to be, I think it's not that used right now, but I think as we go forward, that's going to become a really important part of this web structure.
So the rel me microformat is part of XFN, XHTML Friends Network, which is basically using values on rel links to express friendship. The rel me is the key one there. The rel contact and the other friend-like ones are useful too. The point of rel me is to say this site is also me. Now, obviously, a one-way assertion isn't very helpful, but if you have a two-way assertion, both sites are pointing to each other saying that's me, you can actually trust that reasonably well. We have part of one of the APIs we have at Google is called the Social Graph API, which is, uses the Google crawler to look for these rel me links, finds the two-way connections, and gives you them back. So you feed it in a URL, and it says, here are all the ones that are connected to that by these assertions. That partially helps solve that problem. The other piece that you had there was the asymmetrical question. And that's one of the very interesting things about Twitter and the growth of Twitter, is that they don't require, if I friend you, you must friend me, unlike the older social networks, if you like. It's a slightly different model. The model is, I'm sending stuff out, I'm reading stuff in. Those may be not the same set. And I think that's something that we're seeing in other places. When we added Friend Connect to Blogger, we added following model that does the same thing. I can follow some blogs and others can follow me, and the set may not be joined. And I think that's going to be part of the model as we move forward. We're going to have more asymmetry like that.
The following model as well, so.
Yeah, we just adopted it this week as well.
Yeah.
Can I give you 3 state-of-the-art efforts to solve this? One is that baked into OpenID 2 is something called the attribute exchange. Second is that part of the DISO activity streams effort is to, when I publish a feed, I can say what I'm exposing to who. So that's part of the effort and the goals of that design work. And I also have this crazy idea of what I call dashboard outlines. I've actually been in and pitched it to Aaron Hammer-Lahav and Alan Tom, so I'd love to come in and pitch it to other folks there at Yahoo to get you guys involved with helping to solve the notion of distributed roles. And distributed, because that's really what Facebook Connect was about, was extending this dynamic privacy out into the web, and so the user can control that. We need to make that work in a distributed manner.
You have your question, Aaron?
That's barely. Okay, so
name.
Sorry, name Ian Forrester from the BBC. I disclose I worked on the data portability group, which everyone seems to hate. But one of the things that we kind of, some people hate. One of the things that we kind of come across when we were doing the group was the education factor, and no one up until now has talked about that. You know, how do we tell users or encourage users to evaluate services like Facebook, like MySpace, and go, okay, this service can let me use OpenID, supports OAuth, so it's not going to leak my data all over the place. You know, how do we do that? How do we encourage users to actually, before signing up, not just sign up because their friends are on there, but also to kind of think about what the service is, because there's lots of dodgy services out there and that will leak your data or sell it, and that seems to be the problem. I mean, we've got the kind of technology in place. There's a lot of services that we are using and we're talking about right now in this room, which makes sense. They all work together, but there's a lot of services that don't, and that's the problem. Right. So the general question is the education. Which one of you guys are doing that?
So, well, first of all, we don't hate the data portability group, then where you got that from? I spend a whole bunch of time with those guys. I think the phrasing isn't quite right because it's portability implies removal as opposed to connection. So that's, we ended up standardizing on the word connect between us for this stuff rather than portable. Though in Google we also have the data liberation front whose job it is to make sure stuff can get out of Google. The key thing there is that sounds like a consumer reports type thing. That could be a great thing for data portability to do as an independent body to say, here's a scorecard for each side. Those little scorecards are something that people pay attention to. That may be something you could build to encourage that.
I just think it's too early for the education in that to educate a mainstream user about these issues without confusing them with talk of technology is very difficult in a world where we don't have a lot of great examples of this interoperability working as it should be. We need these great examples of smooth onboardings that honor user privacy and user control. And when we can say, here's how it's supposed to work, it's easier to say, don't ever give your password to another service. And we're just about there, but not quite there yet.
Right. At the moment, everyone is still using everyone else's passwords to get data in, and we need to fix that ourselves before we're going around and evangelize that to everyone else.
I just want to parse out, you asked, it seems like you asked sort of two different questions in there. One was, how do users determine whether they can trust a site with their data and whether it will leak out or not? And the other question is, how can users determine whether the site is using open standards that allow them to interoperate? And I think that the second question is actually easier to answer. I think it's going to be, imagine it's 1994 and you're looking at a web service, and you're not going to use a web service that uses HTTP because it's open standard. You're going to use it because it's an easier site to use and it provides you more value. And I think likewise that the problem right here is a user experience problem, where sites that I think the open standards are going to win because they're going to provide a better user experience. And they're going to provide a better user experience because they're going to attract more developers, because developers will have to do less work. It'll lower the cost of implementation, which means developers can spend that money that they would have spent implementing the custom service doing other stuff and adding features. And it's going to be the same reason. So that's what's ultimately going to win the open standards there, is going to come about because of these things. And if it ends up being that it's a valuable proposition for the user, I think we can take care of, we can allow competition to take care of educating users. If one service offers open standards and another service doesn't, you can believe that the service that offers open standards will make that part of their pitch to users if it's important to users, and they'll use that as part of their advertising. I've already seen it happen with many of the products that use open standards, tout it and make it very obvious, and I think that's the way that this will, and if users associate the standards, the products that use those standards with higher quality and a better user experience, then they'll learn over time these standards produce better user experience. And
Plexo has been trying to evangelize and educate through 2007 and 2008. And quite frankly, it was a very much uphill battle. But when we recently with Google showed a 2-click optimized onboarding that happened under the covers to use a hybrid OpenID OAuth model and an ability to, in one consent page, grant access to the new site you're joining, give that site access to your address book so that you can find your friends there. Well, it worked. It's producing better business results than what we were doing before. And all of a sudden, it's not about evangelizing open standards. It's about how do we implement a great user experience that's good for the user, good for Google so that they don't get scraped, good for the user so they're not giving up their password to a third party, good for the site that's being onboarded to because we get a happier user who's more connected.
Well, I'll have to wrap up this question because...
I just want to add one thing, and please, don't move, okay? All right, now, there's another thing that's going on here. Now, Luke is a recent member of the OpenID Foundation, and there has been an effort to change OpenID from being one component of the stack, an individual piece of the puzzle, to a brand. Because what the real problem here is it's really confusing to keep track of all this stuff. And OpenID has a really nice term. It's a really nice brand. And clearly part of that branding effort is to provide a turnkey solution. Currently, maybe we're calling it the Open Stack. And then what the OpenID Foundation would do would be to educate. So I call upon the board member of the OpenID Foundation to help educate.
But I should say that that success scenario we just demonstrated, OpenID was not mentioned anywhere throughout. Yeah. It was, do you want to join with your Google account? Click the big button, get to a Google page that says, Plexo wants to, do you want Plexo to accept your credentials and have your data? And that worked like a charm.
Hi, my name is Rene. I'm UX evangelist in Microsoft Brazil, and my voice is not so sexy. I'm losing my voice because I talk too much. And my activity stream is much more activity flawed because I talk a lot, I post a lot, I tweet a lot, I make a lot of content. So I think that this is just a quick consideration. We are thinking about users as if they were all the same. I know that I'm an extreme because I post too much, I'm everywhere, I'm pervasive, but for most users, aggregating means search. If I want to know, no, just a quick consideration, if I want to know about you, I do a search, it aggregates you from all different sources. So it's sort of for the regular user, for like a narco user in Brazil. This whole issue about OpenID in being present in several communities at the same time, I don't know if they have the same perception that we do, if they have the same need. So it's a quick consideration. Okay, it's technologically, it's fascinating for us that they're like activity floods like me. It's also wonderful. But I wonder if for the end user, this mixing of things does not commoditize all social spaces if they were one. Just a quick, for example, like LinkedIn. People like LinkedIn, okay, it's for professional purposes, so I know how to behave in LinkedIn. Orkut is for, I don't know, fun, and Facebook is for friends, and Twitter is for day-to-day things. If I mix everything up, what I'm realizing is that the younger generations, they don't understand the protocols anymore. They behave pretty much the same. Like people here in the Venetian, they go from one bar to another dressing the same. They go from Tau to V-Bar dressing the same. So they are behaving as if they were the same, no matter if it's LinkedIn or Orkut. So just a quick reflection of where it's all leading to in terms of all this, okay, we're mixing stuff, but people, regular users, they're not like me, they're not like you. So just, I know it's a mess, but I'm a little messy.
So, well, I have to give a quick one. If you look at the page we got up on the screen, is iGoogle. What that is about, it looks like it's about search. It's the Google search homepage. But actually, there's a bunch of stuff there that's discovery, that's stuff flowing back to you. Because these things are complementary. There's a bunch of stuff you search when you're looking for it, but then you think, I'd like to know when that stuff changes. I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to add that to my page and discover more about it. And if you look at the success of iGoogle in terms of changing the Google homepage from our minimal thing to this complex thing that is drawing information from lots of pages, that's been a very successful product for Google because there are lots of people who like having a homepage that draws stuff in. And these guys make homepages that are like that all the time. And they've got millions of users too. So that, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we have been working really hard on SEO. And actually, we released recently the ability to make your activity stream public. And so basically, if you search right now for Monica Keller, you'll hit my MySpace page. And you'll see the stream and the activities that I chose to share with anybody who's looking for me. So you can show it, actually.
But the flip side of that, which I think was a question more of aggregation as overwhelming because of the compartmentalization that real humans over the age of 28 want to have. And that's absolutely our core focus. And being able to say, here are my Picasso photos, and I want to share them into this aggregator just with family. And maybe I'm getting an OAuth access to that. So it's not public data that's being then downscoped. It's private data that's being shared based on an access control list that's family or friends or business. And that's absolutely where we need to go.
Just a quick anecdote. A friend of mine, he was doing a panel like you guys and a bunch of corporate people in the audience. And he happened to know the name of a lady that was in the audience. And say, okay, privacy is now an interesting issue. For example, what's your name? My name is Maria Teresa, whatever. I know that you, Maria Teresa, loves to make love in the dark. And she was like, oh, you were exposing me. No, I'm not exposing you, it's in Orkut. So it's funny, that's what, in terms of education, do people know that they are so exposed? That they don't have control? I mean, some kind of information they don't belong to an event like this, but they are open and they're like mixed together if they were bytes, and they are not bytes, they are like bits of life.
Let me talk to the director of that one, seeing as I'm the Google guy. He was exposing her in that the Orkut pages aren't visible to everyone. That may have been a friend thing. And so he was actually violating the trust there because he was taking something that had been shared to some users and turning it to everyone. Now, in Brazil, everyone has an Orkut account, so it feels like being on the web. And the public parts of the accounts are still public, but the private parts are still private. So he may not have realized that that was a private thing that he had just revealed to the room, but it's still violating the trust. And that problem of is not one we can fix. If someone's seen the thing, they can always blurt it out to the room or they can publish it on the web. That's one we can't fix with technology. That's one we've got to fix with social trust.
Yeah, I think we're going to see social norms change a lot in the years ahead. I think the same thing that Google did when, I could put my homepage up in 1998 and be reasonably assured that it would sort of fit into the anonymous web. And as search engines got better and when Google came away and sort of blew them away, it changed that, Now people are worried about stuff they put up on the web, or they should be. And, I think that as stuff streams, there's going to be a lot of questions about that. And companies are going to need to innovate a lot in terms of how do we educate users that this data that they're posting is actually public. And, it's a really good question. I think it's not something
but
that
Luke,
I think we have.
that was 11 years ago. How old were you?
Old enough to use a computer.
Okay. So let me just say that the issue here is what I call a digital lifestyle. Okay? And in addition to aggregating, users will be able to have an integrated approach. iGoogle is an integrated approach. Each of these platforms out here provide an integrated approach. And then also, it's highly customizable. So that Orkut user should have the ability, does have the ability, to make that information private. Okay? So the idea is to put the control into the hands of the users. That goes back to what Ian was saying was, we need to educate these users as to what they can do, what controls they can have. Okay?
So there was a great privacy panel at South by Southwest last week that Dana Boyd organized. And Judith Donath at MIT was talking about research she's doing of trying to build people a view of their presence on the web so they can understand what has what they've exposed, and then go back and edit it. And we have bits of that. The social graph API gives you bits of that. But I think that's a worthy endeavor, and it's great for academics and third-party organizations as well as us to be looking at finding ways of expressing that to individuals. They can say, I didn't realize I'd done that. How do I go fix it?
Okay, thank you.
And I think you have a question?
I kind of wanted to go back to the OpenID provider allowing anybody in kind of thing, choosing any OpenID provider. And I wanted to find out what y'all are doing as a best practice for OpenID providers when you let, say, anyone in, and whether you blacklist that OpenID provider or that OpenID provider just goes away. What is your best practice for handling that failure case? The user comes to your site, now they can't log in. What do they do? And is there a clear route to making that kind of a standard situation?
Yeah, so this whole OpenID adoption curve has been characterized by the chicken and egg problem. And we fortunately saw in 2008 a remarkable progress in the big players becoming OpenID providers. And no better examples of that than Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. But then everyone started asking where, and MySpace, and everyone started asking the question, well, will each of these big sites be a relying party to each other? And will they be relying parties to the rest of the OpenID providers of the web? And I think we're at this point now where we need lots of great innovation on the relying party side. And so we've been very focused on being the universal relying party because we felt that was essential to getting great implementations out from these big companies. But what's interesting, and the specific problem you asked is, someone comes up, joins a service using an OpenID from a provider that ends up going away. Well, in this world where almost all of the companies up here have some form of aggregator model, you end up knowing a lot more about the user than simply the ID that they joined with. In fact, you end up with a bundle of identifiers. In the case of the experiment we did with Google, we ended up also with their Gmail email address. In fact, we had that before it started because the dance starts with an invite. So as long as you bind the different identities together in your system, you have a very smooth way of handling that case of that one that they joined with has gone away.
It's still, I mean, it's still a problem though. Like,
yeah.
But it's the same problem as today I sign up with an email and then that email goes away. You know, at least with with Facebook Connect, this is like one of the common questions we get. I mean, we're not an OpenID provider, but it's the same problem. It was one of the common questions we get from potential websites is like, well, what happens if they cancel their account or whatever? But I think with these OpenID providers, it actually, our experience has shown that users are more likely to change email addresses over time. And they might be, like, say I sign up with a college email address or a work email address or a service that, you know, goes away, or I change a lot of people still use their Comcast and then they move to another city and anyway, so the emails change, but if it's a provider on top of that, then we actually stand a chance for people to voluntarily keep their emails up to date. So Facebook will guarantee that as long as the person has a Facebook account, they'll keep their Facebook account up to date with their latest email address, because they do that naturally, because they want to get updates from Facebook, and so the website benefits from that automatic update. So I think that, you know, with the central management.
As these guys say, they've both been keeping multiple email addresses. People will start to keep multiple OpenIDs. The rel.me stuff is also an important part of that. If you've got an OpenID that points to another one, and you've still got that graph when one of them has gone away, you can discover the rest of them. There's also a representation in portable contacts, which is accounts list, which gives you different accounts at different sites. It doesn't give login credentials, but it says, I am also this user at this site, so you can potentially authenticate with that later as well. And that was deliberately designed in by, you know, when we were building it, because that's a valuable part of this model. So those accounts are not necessarily email accounts. They are, you know, they may be your MySpace account, they may be your iGoogle account or whatever.
So we're down to like the last 7 minutes, so we probably can take maybe 2 questions. Sorry, Angus. So you go, and then she goes, and I believe we'll probably get time.
Great. My name is Andrew Rist, and my question was, you have this, everybody said really nice things about open standards and everything, but you have this kind of conflict between rapid innovation and standardization. And I know you've all gone through that with OpenID. And so I was going to ask if you guys had any comments about the whole standardization process and, you know, the kind of like playing off all of the stakeholders you have, you know, between the free and open source at one end all the way up to big corporations. Do you have any comments about that?
So I can take that one. Yeah, there is an issue of the existing standard bodies, their processes tend to get long and slow. And what we found with several of these standards was that it was easy to get consensus first among a group of organizations and then potentially take it to a more, you know, robust standards body, if you like, later. One of the differences is now is because we're used to web-style collaboration is we can iteratively standardize. So with Open Social, we agreed a bunch of stuff first, shipped that, iterated on that, added some more, and that process is ongoing. And we've seen that with OAuth and OpenID as well. There is this group called the Open Web Foundation that's trying to make this process easier by standardizing some of the legal agreements. The painful part of this is often putting the legal agreements in place so that you can have a waiver of being sued and so on, and that kind of stuff. That's often the constraint on a larger company joining because they're more suable than a small company. So if that's something you're concerned about, have a look at the Open Web Foundation because that's trying to come up with common terms for developing standards in this kind of way.
Oh, well, yeah, it's sort of the meta question of what's the right time to standardize, and I think, well, like, so Monica's been working a lot on activity streams, so that's supposedly the purpose of this forum. So that's like that's a standard that's emerging right now.
Yeah, so basically we're trying to ship a product and the standard is a moving target for us. So we basically had to just sit down with a subgroup of people and say, well, these are the core concepts that we're going to do right now, and here's how we're going to extend it. So there's a lot of, since it's using Atom or RSS, there's a lot of extensions that we can use that are already out there. But there is definitely going to be a lot more iterations.
But one really hopeful sign, OpenID took a few years to go from concept to mainstream adoption.
2004, I think.
Yeah, I don't know the exact start, but OAuth followed, but had a shorter pathway, and in part because the big players who each had their own unique auth system actually saw the genuine benefit to developers and users if there were a common auth standard. And then this spring, actually inspired by a conversation with Microsoft, who had just come out with another contacts API, which is great. An API is far better than scraping, but each new proprietary API is another beautiful snowflake, which is a burden on developers. And so a light bulb went off, and we said, what if there were one way to do representation of people data that was inclusive of address book and friends list and profiles? And we went around to Microsoft, to Google, to Yahoo, to MySpace, to a variety of players, and everyone said, hey, that's a really good idea. And all of a sudden, we also discovered that Open Social had Open Social RESTful APIs that were pretty similar to what we had sketched out. And so we said, let's split the differences. And so we're now at a point where MySpace is supporting it because they're supporting Open Social RESTful APIs 0.8.1 or above. Plaxo has an implementation live that anyone can hit today. And we're going to announce some more next week where the momentum is really building. So the time period between idea and agreement is shrinking because we're all realizing.
Kudos to Angus Logan in the house for that one. Thank you, Angus.
Inspiration right there.
Okay, so we have to
and
take
this
the
was shipped by Microsoft, yes.
Yeah, we have to take the last question. We have 2.5 minutes until time. So.
Okay, my name's Rita, and I really love the story you talked about Plaxo and Google working together with regards to using your Gmail account to authenticate into Plaxo. And I also like the extension of that, of how great that will be for developers to be able to do that on their own personal sites. Is Google going to be offering that service to other people in the future? Or?
Yes.
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 The service is already up with the endpoints, yeah.
There was no proprietary code written on either side. So it's just an existence proof that anyone can copy.
Yeah, it's OpenID plus OAuth plus portable contacts. It's those three glued together.
Okay, thank you.
You can ask your question now.
Final question.
Okay, it'll be quick. It's about activity streams, which is what we're here to talk about. I see a problem at the moment because if somebody, for example, tweets something I go to Friend Feed, I see it there. I go to Windows Live, I see it there. I go to Twitter, I see it somewhere else. That's a bit of a pain in the ass. So going back to what Monica was just talking about, coming up with a standard for activity streams, wouldn't it be great if I could sort of push data back and say, well, I've read that particular activity item. Is anybody thinking about that? Monica, are you thinking about that in that standard that you're just talking about?
That's not in the spec right now.
Yeah, that is not in the spec.
That'd be awesome.
The other battlefield, by the way, the other battlefield is over comments.
Yeah.
That's the real
That's
battlefield.
the next question.
Huge, huge. Next year, we'll be talking about comment aggregation.
So very simply, is there a way to me to say, I've read that, I don't want to read it
So
again?
we did an attempt at this a few years back for blog reading called attention.xml. It didn't get much uptake. And the challenge was that there wasn't much information flowing around. I think it may be that with this stuff, because we are expecting information to be flowing back and forth, we could add a back channel for that. That's possible.
So would you like to help with that? We've got the
I'd love
specs.
to.
Sign up that, gentlemen.
So the activity, I mean, one thing that I've noticed about this, the activity streams and all these specs, they're all open specs. So if anybody's interested in helping or just reading about them, they're a little dense at first, but you read through the spec, and then they all have mailing lists. So I just encourage you all to go, go live search them and figure out that, we're at MIX. So.
And also, getting back to what the gentleman in the back was saying, nowhere did you hear W3C, IETF, OASIS. These people got nothing to do with this process.
Okay. That's it. So we're at time. Thank you very much for attending. I've been informed. Give a hand for our panelists. I believe there are talk evaluation cards on the chairs. Please fill them out. Like if you like the talk, I'll share the scores with the panelists. And if you have additional questions, please wait afterwards and ask the panelists. Please take off your mics when you do that. And thank you very much. And have a great Vegas afternoon.